Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of the Empower Performance Podcast. Today's a special episode. Typically, I'll do an interview with a guest. These are my first repeat guests. It's Ben Racke and Tyler Peretz. And we're going to do more of a roundtable style conversation. So we each have a couple topics that we wanted to talk about. And at the end, we're going to finish with some hot takes. Ben, if you want to kick us off with whatever subject you want to go on into with the deep dive, please do.
Yeah, well, I guess the first kind of conversation here is this idea of individualizing training. We've talked about this before, Matt, the idea of, most, especially like when we're talking about high school athletes, most of these kids needing a lot of the same stuff, a lot of the same, you could even say like the same exercises, movement patterns, kind of however you want to look at it. They're force deficient. So it's like, hey, we need to like get stronger on big global patterns. Like we need to get stronger squatting, hinging, lunging, single leg stuff, upper body pushing and pulling, etc. I don't think that's like ever in the absence of like sprinting and jumping and playing sports, right? But when it comes to like the topic of like individualization for people, I think we can all agree that every human that we train needs some sort of power training, some sort of strength training, and I think like when I say mobility training, I'm not necessarily saying like the pails and rails or not saying that can't be part of certain protocols. I would say that like, if you come in and that's what you're doing for an hour, I would say with an adult, if you were going to do an hour of something like that on with an athlete or something like that on a low day, sure. Like I could see where that could make sense. With an adult who, again, like if we zoom way out and we look at just the simple fact that like, I don't know what the stat is, but like most people in our society are not even hitting physical activity guidelines. I knew you knew where I was going with that.
Yeah.
Matt was like, that's probably not like the best use of our time. So, but again, I'm not saying you can't do that in a 10-minute warm-up period or whatever like that. That's not what I'm getting at. Like, obviously, but with, mobility training for adult populations, that can just look like good quality strength training, through their whatever range of motion that they have access to in these big global patterns, squatting, hinging, single leg, upper push, upper pull. And again, if you have a showroom of machines, like that can be actually a very useful starting point for a lot of people. Now, I'm not saying that that's the only thing that you should do. And I personally don't program like that because there is, I think, some level of quote unquote functionality that comes from, deadlifting, squatting, doing things that where you aren't externally supported at all times. But going off of this like individualization thing, like I'm not going to have, Tracy, I'm using her name. She's one of my newer adult clients. Like I'm not going to have Tracy who is overweight and like has body composition goals and, has never really trained. Well, I take that back. With Tracy specifically, she had a personal trainer for a period of time, lost some weight, but it was more like, okay, we're doing this fitness challenge at work for this amount of time. And then like, the habits and the things that she was, that never stuck. And I think more so than anything was a mindset thing, not to get sidetracked. But when we're talking about like individualizing power, let's say for an adult client, it's like, yeah, we're going to start with like sprints and jumps and stuff like that. Like, yeah, probably not. Now, the caveat to that is like you can manipulate jump training with bands. You know what I'm saying? Like you can do band assisted pogo leap. Like the way I like to do it in like the semi-private groups is like, all right, you pick a cardio exercise. Okay. And it's going to be kind of like a minute on, minute off type of thing. We're just getting warmed up. Pick a cardio. We've got a mobility exercise. And again, I've got like kind of a theme of the day, if they're squatting, like maybe we're doing some sort of like a hip mobility thing. If it's a deadlift thing, maybe we're doing some sort of like, spinal mobility thing. If it's a pressing day, we'll do some sort of like T-spine rotation drill or something like that. And again, I mix these up, show them different things. And there's some people that just like, they like the one thing and that's the one thing that they really want to do every time. And they feel like it addresses like their specific mobility needs, and great, that's cool. But then we do, an upper body power and a lower body power. The upper body power, and again, like these are just things that like I think everybody needs, like every human being needs in some capacity, right? So like an upper body power for one of our athletes, although I do throw med balls, but that could be a plyo push-up, right? Or a, obviously like snatching, kettlebell snatching, the list goes on, right? Like, sky tosses, overhead tosses, like if you have the space for that kind of stuff, whatever. I have a slam wall, so we do a lot of, rotational med ball stuff. Now again, like the med balls I think are great for adults, but then when it comes to like the lower body power stuff, I think you have to get a little bit more creative again, because like high effort jumping, sprinting. Now I do have some I do have some adults that do run, and they still are um trying to play recreational sports and doing things like that. So like they can sprint and run and jump, and that's cool. But like most, and I think again, Matt, you've worked with a ton of adults. Like most adults, especially getting started, aren't ready for that kind of stuff. So again, like you can build in a ton of capacity with like, band assisted pogo leaps, even like, and once they've kind of graduated and they feel comfortable, doing the band assisted pogo leaps where they're not like, their calves aren't getting like a, crazy pump after, 30, 45 seconds, a minute of, hopping, then we can start to take the band away and do some light tier, and I do like Matt Watson's stuff for that because it does scale plyos very nicely, where you can introduce, especially like that light tier and deep tier stuff for adult populations. And some of that deep tier stuff, like they don't even have, like their feet don't even necessarily have to leave the floor. It can just be like a pulse, but you're still exposing like the joints and the tissues to like faster loading than what they're normally used to. You understand what I'm saying? That if everybody in the audience kind of is picking up what I'm putting down. So I think just from an individualization perspective, like, yeah, I think most people need a lot of the same things, but that's where I think the individualization comes in, is just like the tools, the exercises, the specific way you're going about like getting some upper body and lower body power training, right? Mm-hmm. When it comes to like training adults versus training. So again, if you kind of have that framework of the, all right, what do I want the stimulus to be? There's kind of a wide range of things that you can use to accomplish, a good stimulus for, an adult population as well. So I don't know what else you guys have to add to that. You guys can chime in if you have anything.
Yeah, so that reminds me of a couple of things. Tyler, I'll get your opinion on this too, but one of my clients talks about sports specific. Sometimes he's a golfer, and he'll see like this guy doing like a T-spine mobility drill or like a band rotation, and he's like, "Look how specific it is." And I'm like, "It's just it could be the same for a baseball guy, it could be the same for a softball athlete, it could be the same for anybody that rotates, and that's everybody. Everybody rotates. It's just a natural movement that people do. So I don't like kind of claiming that something is, hashtag blank specific. Along the lines of like sports specificity, I think that has more to do with energy demands and like common injury sites, and just prepping people for stuff like that. It's just making sure they feel ready going into competition, and that looks different from sport to sport. But then I find even within each sporting demand, even any team or any individual within the sport, you have different builds, you have different injury histories, different preferences, different styles, different goals. And that's where you have to like focus mainly on the human, which is why I think that personal training is kind of, nice. In my opinion, I like to do that a lot, or like 2-on-1 training, where I get to really look at the individual, say, what do they want to achieve? How do we get there? But also sometimes their goals will be in line with what they're good at and not address the things that they're bad at. And then you actually have to give them some of the stuff they're bad at because that's holding them back. And so it's not just all keeping them happy by giving them what they're good at. And then long term, it kind of has negative effects. I have some clients that just want to do, dips and bench press and all that stuff, never train legs or core, and have back pain, and, don't feel like they can like run and play sports with their kids. And so I got them doing, some athletic stuff. And now they're like, man, I feel great. I'm able to do all these other things. And suddenly their goals will change. But if I right off the bat said, you're never going to do dips and you're never going to do bench press, I would not have that client anymore. So there's the service side of things. There's the giving them what they need versus kind of what they want. And then, yeah, like adaptation is adaptation. And then this is where optimal comes in. And I think it's kind of annoying. But so an example is like, you can't do optimal with like a 50-year-old client who's never trained before and hasn't trained or done anything active in like 10, 20 years. Just doesn't exist. There is no optimal there. It's kind of context dependent. So like you're talking about, some people can't even do like jump rope without having a calf strain. It's just too much load, too much strain on their calf. So you got to make them bounce a little bit in place or do it with some assistance. And one of my clients, like if you have issues, one of the main things people talk about is the best way to develop power is to increase your force production or your velocity. So you have to hit the extreme. And some people argue that hitting the middle doesn't actually do anything. It's a watered down stimulus for both. And I think, okay, we're not going to write off Olympic lifting and everything in between right away just because there's a better way to do things. If some people can't sprint and some people can't lift really, really heavy, which is most of my adult clients, yeah, kettlebell swings aren't the worst thing in the world. Med ball slams aren't the worst thing in the world. Are they the best for power development? No. Are you going to say these people don't deserve to train power or try to develop it in any capacity? So,
Yeah, you know that
yeah.
though. Like we know that. We know that it's not the best, but like that's not that we're I'm not training an elite athlete, and
Mhm.
I'm not and regardless, even if I was training an elite athlete, maybe there is a certain time where that stimulus is strong enough.
Yeah. A high school freshman doesn't have to train like LeBron James, and it's kinda weird when you just, like, copy what you see, you're like, "Oh, well, he's doing it, so I should do it," but also LeBron James is LeBron James. He was built different, and he's also at a different stage in his career. I'll use that example, a lot of times, but then also, like, there's the personality aspect too. I have some clients that you're talking about mobility and how it can look very different. Some clients will refuse to do these kinda like yoga-based, like, stretchy movements and all that stuff, so I have to, like, trick them into doing mobility. I'll have a client do, like, deficit straight leg RDLs, pretty straight leg RDLs with like a heavy kettlebell. And they'll think, oh, I'm doing a strength training exercise, but they get a lot of length at the hamstring and that helps with the range of motion over time. And then somebody else, they might not want to do that because it seems too hard or too challenging. So yeah, you can hold long duration stretches or you can do assisted stretches. I see you do the cable 90/90s like all the time where it pulls you over your hip and you get like a really nice stretch. So it really is just kind of understanding the client's preferences and still trying to find what's best for them. What will they actually do? What will they do with enjoyment and with intent? Because intent drives adaptation. Sometimes I try to get clients to do warm-ups before I get there so I can maximize the training time. If they don't like the movement, they're gonna skip it. So I gotta find a variation that they'll actually do. Tyler, if you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, you guys pretty much, got I think to everything possible on there. I mean, the one thing I would say, I mean, I agree. I think when it comes to individuality, obviously I primarily work with both the high school and college athletes. That's just the realm that I'm in. A lot of times, if we're looking at individuality, it's a little more on if the way I see it, if it's a kid that if I have something written on the program versus maybe like if they have a certain feeling. So, like a prime example, last night I was with my high school hockey team and we were doing front squats. We're doing, some 3x5 front squats. They can lift a little heavier in the day. And one of the girls said to me, she said, "Hey, like, I don't like the feeling like at the front squat like today." And I said, "Okay, like, so for you instead, I'm going to give you two choices. You can either do a back squat instead, or you can do the leg press because we're still getting a similar stimulus. We're still focusing on that pressing, squatting motion." And she was like, "Oh, wait, really?" I said, "Yeah, like if you don't like doing that or if it doesn't feel right, like I'm not going to force you to do something." And I think that's where, regardless if you work with athletes or if you work with older gen pop or just anybody. At the end of the day, the individuality is what's going to make them come back and create that buy-in at the end of the day. I think no matter what side of everything you're on, whether, like I said, it's, working with the athletes, working individually with private clients, at the end of the day, if you're giving something that's not going to hurt them and it's providing a stimulus for them that you want, but also something that they're paying for and they want as well. If it all works out at the end of the day, I think obviously there's more than one way to achieve whatever you need to.
I personally love the idea of giving athletes a menu, like a trainable menu.
Mhm.
There is always this like fight in me, right? Where it is like, okay, like I know I've got a kid who, is gonna be a Division 1 kid, or like has committed to play. Like in the back of your mind, you're thinking like, okay, they are gonna be in a college weight room in a year from now or 2 years from now or whatever. And it's like there are probably some lifts that I probably should introduce them to. You know where I'm going, Tyler. You're shaking your head. Like I probably should like encourage them to like stick with a front squat long enough to like at least be comfortable enough to perform the movement for the said sets and reps. Also, that's leading into like Olympic lifting and being able to catch a clean. So I always wrestle with that because on one end of the spectrum I have a lot of volleyball girls, and on one end of this and on one end of the spectrum, like with these volleyball girls, obviously they're the ones that are playing a higher level volleyball. They're over 6 foot, so they are taller. So most of the time, like when I look at their squat when they front squat, it looks better too, just because it's anteriorly loaded. They kind of like especially if you give them, you know, a little bit of heel elevation, like it's just a really nice looking squat.
Mhm.
Same can be said, I think, really though, if you set it up right and they're doing a back squat, like if you give them enough heel elevation in a back squat, like, and tell them like, I don't want your butt like moving backwards, like I want it to move straight down. You know, that can be a good strategy too. But again, like it's that thing of like, all right, well, they're potentially going to be asked to clean at the collegiate level, and it's like we should probably develop some sort of strength and mobility through their upper body just to hold the bar, like in that position, like through their wrists, elbows, lats, upper back. But again, like if a kid just like absolutely hates it, from my perspective in my weight room, I've kind of learned to be like, okay, like that's fine. Like I'm okay. And like, you know, some of these kids too, like they've done front squats and back squats and they're like, you know, I can load the back squat a little bit heavier and it just feels better and I like it. And I'm like, okay, like that's fine. Now, what I will say is like when kids get like summer packets or they get stuff from their strength and conditioning staff, you know, once that they're in that kind of last summer of, you know, being in the weight room consistently with me outside of like just holidays and summer and stuff like that. You know, I will try my best to like whatever that strength coach wants them to be
Proficient
good
at.
enough good enough at good enough at on day one. I do my best to try to like meet those demands, you know, for a couple reasons. Like I want the kids, like when they step into the weight room, they're a little bit ahead of the game because they have followed the program and they have
Mhm.
like done the specific exercises. They have followed the specific program that, you know, they've sent. Now obviously sometimes you get them and you're like, oh my gosh, this is dog water. But more often than not, it's I would say overwhelming. It's more often than not, it's pretty solid stuff. You know, and it's just maybe certain things are different. And I'm like, hey guys, like, you know, and I kind of leave it up to the athlete, right? Too, where it's like, what do you want to do? You know, do
Mhm.
you want to kind of continue doing things and going this direction, or do you want to kind of, you know, do some of these things that you may need to be prepared for and prepared to do, like when you do step into the weight, and you may be a little bit ahead of the game. And every time that I've done that with a kid, my most recent example, I'd say, is one of the girls that I worked with for the last 3 years. She was in high school, and then obviously when she comes home and stuff and breaks, she's a Western Kentucky volleyball player. But she came back and she was like, man, she's like, thanks for like introing me to the cleans and the front
Mhm.
squats and that kind of stuff, because it really paid off when I got down there. Because like and I don't say any of this like she was always a gifted athlete.
Mhm.
I definitely think the weight room helped her, but like she was always a really gifted athlete. But I mean, she was second team all conference as a true freshman. Like she's very, very good. But like she told me, like I felt way more prepared in the weight room than basically every other freshman. And and I felt good about that. You know, that was a good feeling, because it's like I think oftentimes I think that can be really challenging for kids, like
Mhm.
getting to college their freshman year and going into a weight room, not knowing anybody, not really know, they know the strength coaches, but they don't really know who they are. And you know, if you're struggling in there with like even just like a front squat, you know, it's like you can kind of feel like an outside. I've been there. Like I know how that feels to be, you know, kind of weak in the weight room, not feel prepared. So I take pride in that. And yeah, so I think, I don't know, geez, now I'm
Well,
rambling.
so I actually kind of want to go off that a little bit because what's really interesting is you send people off to college, and Tyler, you work with people in college. So you can see from both perspectives who actually preps up the freshmen. And that probably makes your job a lot easier, Tyler, if you have people that had good strength coaches in high school, for example, and then Ben, you preparing people for success in college. But then also talking about individualization based off that, not forcing certain exercises on people. Yeah, it's great to give them that requisite thing. You'd kind of hope that like the training, the priority is the adaptation for sporting success, not for weight room success, although you still want to have some level of weight room success. If someone hates cleans, for example, and you're devoting way too much time towards it, and they're still really weak, and they're still really slow, and they're still really deconditioned, then that's not a good allocation of time. And I'm sure you don't do that. I'm sure that's when it's like, all right, well, what's the main thing? But if you can also add that element of, okay, this person has good fundamental technique and stuff that you'd expect to do in a college weight room setting, then I feel like I set them up for success. Flip side, from a collegiate strength coach perspective, I know that they have programs. I know that sometimes they do it based off experience. They'll do it based off freshmen will lift different than seniors because I've had 4 years with the seniors. But the other thing too is you would hope that a college program won't force exercises and say this is the only way you can become more powerful, because they should also have the opinion that the most important thing is on field or on court success, success in sporting endeavors. So if they're focusing more on weight room numbers, did your squat go up, your bench go up, your deadlift go up, your clean go up? I'm a good coach. And they're forcing people to do movements that just aren't right for them. But then it kind of gets messed up there. And I can't speak too much to the college weight room setting because I haven't been around that too much. But Tyler, you can probably speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely looking because obviously now, doing both high school and college, but definitely more, on the college side. It's always a blessing when I have a kid who comes in, as a freshman and they're used to the weight room. So it's really tough, especially when, I have someone who might be a really good athlete, but in reality, they probably were able to utilize their athleticism and their skills to not really maybe have to touch weight because they were able to get by with what they had. That's why and I think I said it on the episode that we did, that I literally asked everybody, like, first day that they're with me, especially all the new people, like, hey, like, it's a real question. Who here has never touched a weight before? And I actually just took on women's basketball for us as well. So last week, I literally asked that question and one of them put their hands up and I said, okay, like, perfect. That puts me in a good spot to know. But honestly, the kids are going to be better off if they're obviously doing something. I mean, if you're a freshman in high school, that's probably the best time I think you can really start. I would say even earlier if possible, but definitely during your high school years, if you can find a good strength coach, regardless if it's at your high school or, they have, the connections with guys like the both of you, then absolutely start getting on those connections. Just because when you make that transition to college, you really try to get going on day one. And the less amount of time I really have to teach somebody brand new something and not really throw off the entire program or plan that I'm trying to do. Obviously, at times I have to adapt, but early on, the less adapting I have to do to make sure that we're doing whatever we need to in the preseason that doesn't really have a lot of wiggle room with different adaptations we can do with the lift itself or the program selection, we're going to be better off the less that I have to change or have to reteach, like, hey, we have to do a back squat assessment. Like, if I can do a really quick one and just watch all the new people squat, okay, perfect, we're good. It's going to take me 2 minutes, 3 minutes tops, and then we'll get right into it, compared to obviously someone who's like brand new and has never did a goblet squat in their life and looking to try to do, back squats or like pin squats with a really high concentric output. So, it definitely makes my job a lot easier when, they're able to connect and do that before they step foot on campus.
I kind of want to use what you said to transition into the topic that I want to bring up, which was long-term athletic development. You're talking about if you start as a freshman, that's a really good time to step into the weight room. And I agree. I usually find that like my mentality is middle school, high school is a really good time to start weight training. Middle school, probably just learning the basics. Freshman year, if you have that middle school foundation, you start pushing weights. If you don't, then you're just kind of delayed a little bit in that process. But then like you see a lot of people that they try as early as possible. I've had parents reach out to me with like 9 and 10-year-old kids for like performance training for their travel soccer team or something like that. And it's like your kid would benefit from playing other sports, from playing tag, from climbing, from running, jumping, like playing, swimming, anything. Do you know what I mean? He would just benefit from moving as a whole, being a kid. And then the other thing too is if you make it too much of a job early on, kid's gonna fall out of love with the sport almost immediately. And I've seen that. I've had some athletes where it's like some sessions, they're just like not interested at all or anything like that. I'm like, "Are you good?" And it's like, "Yeah." It's like, "Do you like this exercise? No. Do you like that?" I'm like, "Do you like strength training?" I'm like, "No." "Do you like your sport?" They're like, "No." I'm like, "Man, this kid got burnt out." Do you know what I mean? I'm like, what was the point of this? Is it that maybe a parent was trying to achieve something for their kid, but the kid's heart wasn't into it? Was it that too many coaches were making them do too much stuff? So you don't know what the answer is, but like, one account that I love, actually 2 accounts that I love, I think they do a great job is, Clay Mefford, one of the guests on the podcast earlier. Ben, you know Clay. He, told me about a guy named Jeremy Frisch who does a lot of really fantastic stuff with kids. It just looks like recess. Like, these kids have hurdles and, these poles that they have to, like, zigzag through, and they have to play these games and, like, swing and all these different things. And these kids are learning so many different skills. And another guy, Ray Zingler, he has his son training. He has this, like, whole, content of his kid training, and the kid's just, like, carrying bricks and, like, slamming things with sledgehammers, and he climbs up the back of a lacrosse goal and then jumps off and rolls and all that stuff, and it's like, what is the best way to train? Early on, it's as general as possible, and then the higher you wanna reach, because 'cause we're talking about that base, we're talking about a mountain, right? You need a really wide base to have a high peak. Make the kid do everything, find what they love, learn as many skills, it makes them a better mover, gives them more resiliency, and then if you actually wanna hit those high levels and you have that wide base, you're gonna have a really high peak, and that's when you can start to specialize your training and do the quote unquote sports specific stuff.
Bingo. I think I'm both of my kids are in gymnastics,
That's
and
incredible. Yeah.
Layla, my 6-year-old, is. I mean, obviously we're a very active family in general. You know, like we'll come to the gym and put the flag football flags on and play flag tag and do different games, stuff like that. Right. She's always here jumping off of stuff, jumping onto stuff. My kids always want to go to the parks, obviously, when the weather's nice. You know, she plays, like I said, she does gymnastics, which gymnastics is kind of a year-round thing. She just does it 2 times a week, nothing crazy. Plays basketball seasonally, plays soccer seasonally, wants to play flag football, you know, like, so there's so many things. She wants to play softball, she wants to play, you know, t-ball. Like there's so many things. Obviously she's at an age where she's being introduced to like a lot of sports, but just the gymnastics stuff alone, like in the past year, like, I mean, I can tell that her body has changed, man. Like she's just like very fit and very put together. And again, if you think about like youth gymnastics, like all of the stuff that you were saying, they're kind of like they're doing that stuff. Like they're crawling, they're running, they're jumping, they're hanging, they're flipping, bending, twisting. They're doing all of these things with their body. And again, obviously she's playing other sports as well that are, you know, coordination and running and, you know, hand-eye coordination, right? So to your point, like it's just like let kids be kids, you know, let kids go play, like, but obviously like we're in a society again in just a time period where like technology is going crazy. And you know what are parents doing, you know, because I think that's really what this conversation like boils down to is like what are we doing as adults? Like, are you physically active? Are you hitting the, you know, general physical activity guidelines, you know, like, and if not, there's probably a strong chance that your kid is not going to be, you know, is not only like not going to be a great athlete, but probably not going to be like super healthy either from a physical standpoint, from a physiological standpoint. And I would say from a psychological standpoint, like we know what movement and exercise and just like doing that kind of stuff does for, you know, mental health. I think there's some research out there to suggest that like, you know, exercise is just as good, if not better than, you know, SSRIs when we're comparing. And again, I'm not saying I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, so, but the physical activity guidelines are, you know, they're there for a reason. Like obviously it is important, but I don't know, you know, I don't know how many parents out there are, you know, are valuing that stuff, you know. So, but like, you know, and you're about to be a parent, so
Yeah, I can't talk about it yet, but yeah, I can plan, but I can't speak from
so,
experience.
but yeah, but you already know, man. Like
Yeah.
you already know how important it is. So it's not something that's like, you know, it's going to be something like you're going to do active things with your kids, and you're going to, you know, put your kids into, you know, different sports and making sure that they're developing, you know, a physicality about them, but also just like a good relationship with sports and a good relationship with
The
their
most
body.
important thing, because
Yeah.
everybody talks about my kid being a pro athlete, and almost none of them will make it, and if you have the kid hate their experience, and then they're just burnt out, and they don't wanna touch a weight or something like that, you've actually ruined the whole point of doing this in the first place, which is, especially team sports, creating relationships, learning to work with others, being physically active. You were talking about, like, the body and the mind are connected. I think the body is the mind. I think we like to categorize things and chunk them and separate them, but they are the same. So, like, I've never seen a kid who's out playing for 2 hours come inside and he's, like, upset unless maybe they, like, skinned their knee or someone cheated in, like, a game or something like that, but otherwise, like, that's a happy, healthy kid, and you're talking about how your kids are happy and healthy, and I think you talked about parents too. You move with your kids. There's so many parents these days that say, you know, "Back when I was your age, I was out until the sun was down. Why don't you kids do that? Why are you on the computer and all that stuff?" It's like, when was the last time you went outside with your kid right now and threw a ball with them?
Yeah, bro, like you're not doing
Yeah,
that.
you're not doing it, so
Like, yeah, that kind of stuff is, I think, is huge. I mean, yeah, I just think I guess going back to the you know, having a good relationship with the sports and stuff, you know, it's like the first question that I ask Layla when she's done with any of her sports, any of the things that she's doing is like, "Did you have fun?"
yeah, it's great.
You know, like, "Did you have fun?" Like, you might have lost, you might have, you know, like, you know, she does the rope climb at gymnastics. She doesn't always get to the top, so she doesn't always get a nerd's rope. But it's like, did you have fun? Yeah. I'm like, okay. Like that's it. Like, and I mean, she's 6, so it's not like, her effort and attitude is always good because she's around her friends and she's in an environment that's fun. Youth sports is fun, right? But like, as she gets older, like the conversation is going to be like, as long as you like have a good attitude and you give great effort, whatever your best effort is on that day, like I get it. Like life ebbs and flows and shit's gonna happen, and like just like as long as you have a good attitude and good effort, and that's what I tell like kids when I bring them in for their assessment. Right? It's just like I really only have two expectations: is like have a good attitude and give great effort, and if you can do that, like, well, you're gonna be totally fine. You're gonna have success if you're consistent, right? Like, and obviously you have to put, like I said, like intent, effort into the training. Like you can't just show up and lift the same weights over and over. And I do have kids that want to do that, but with my kids, it's like attitude. My children, attitude, effort, like, are you having fun? Like,
Yeah.
is this fun for you? Like, because it's a game, because it's a sport. Like, it's not. The sun will come up tomorrow, as they say. Um, but but yeah, no, I think the Jeremy Frisch's stuff is awesome.
Mhm.
I personally don't think I would have like the patience to work with like younger
Yeah,
kids
that
like
age.
that, and that kind of a and that kind. Now I like doing that with like my own kids, but again, like this comes back to just like I think the push in our society should be for like every parent to be doing that kind of stuff with their kids. You get what I'm saying? Like that should just be
That's a good thing,
part of
yeah.
our culture.
Yeah, yeah. So kinda going off that, and then Tyler, you can definitely speak to this, but, what the idea is that you start general and you become specific, but I find that we've gone so specific at all levels that sometimes generality is actually beneficial. So, like, Paul Fabritz is a basketball guy who works with a lot of, like, elite, high school, college, and pros, and he says sometimes for the warm-ups, he'll just have them dribble a soccer ball and do something totally different than what they normally do to warm them up because he says these people are so much doing the same thing that they're gonna get burnt out, physically or mentally doing that, and if you give them something different, that's actually quote unquote optimal. It doesn't have to be specific all the time. And I'm sure you guys have seen if you make your kids, instead of an optimal warm up, play spike ball or handball or something like that. I used to play soccer tennis with some of the kids at Pro Force. You're never going to get a kid that's like more ready for a workout than when they're done with that. And they had fun in the process and it makes someone head back. And like, it's a win across the board. And it's because, yeah,
On the jump, they PR on the jump mat every single time.
yeah, yeah. Do you ever try like with your guys even to make like a little bit more general sometimes or, like, put some play into it, some competition, make it fun to get the energy up.
I mean, like in a position I would love to do that because I'll look at like other people's stuff for example, like Steve White, who he's, a guy up in the Northeast. Met him down at Coach 'em Up. And I watch a lot of his stuff. A lot, very similarly, a lot of his warm up stuff he does with some of the younger athletes is essentially gameplay. For me, it's kind of tough because I'm so constrained on like the time that I'm able to spend with them. So if, unfortunately they're going to get a pretty similar warm up, I might be able, if I have the ability to throw something in there, be like, hey, you know what, to warm up today, we're going to play spike ball, and get guys up in a gym or, do something like that. Or, hey, you know what, just for fun, let's go play like dodgeball or something. And guys are,
Yeah,
moving faster than I probably have ever seen any of them maybe do in a game,
yeah,
shockingly, or like they're just so upbeat. I really think, it's obviously that game aspect, but I would like to do that a little more. Obviously, being in the college sector, I have to follow specific constraints at times. But like going on to the entire thing, I mean, obviously, I am not in the place where I have my own children, nor am I expecting
yeah,
one anytime soon that I know of.
that you know of.
But, like, even, like, looking back to, like, my childhood, like, I would always be outside, like, shooting a basketball, and, my dad, he would walk out, and he'd be like, "Alright, let me get a few shots." Like, so he would come and do that with me. I grew up in a household where both my parents were collegiate athletes. That's what I always was around. I think it goes back to what we say, like, the kids are gonna see what their parents are doing, and they're gonna copy that. So if they see that their parents are continuously, going to do some activity of some sort that's really good for them, then the kids are used to that. That's what they see their parents doing. And what kid doesn't, when they're however young, want to be just like their mom or just be like their dad, and they're going to copy a lot of the things they do, a lot of the, from a psychological and physiological standpoint, they're going to try to do everything that their parents are doing because that's what they're used to. But yeah, I mean, that's what I grew up with. And then um even like when we do like our pregame stuff and we go through like, hey, like obviously we just started our season and we have, on the whiteboard, like, all right, here are the guys to watch out for, kind of go over the game plan. What we do, we have the keys to the game, and some of them can be limit transition points, like take care of the ball. But the biggest thing we always put as like number 4, and it's always the most important thing, is we always just say, have fun. Like, guys, it's a game at the end of the day. This isn't going to make or break what your life ends up being like.
Mhm.
You're at, a small Division III school. Obviously, yeah, you want to go on to another level. But at the end of the day, when you and your significant other are out with another, couple, the first question that's going to be asked to them is, did you play a college sport or did you do that? And you're gonna be like, no, that's not. And I tell recruits that all the time, like kids who are looking at the school. And we just tell all of our guys that, like, that's not the first question that's gonna be asked. Obviously, from a standpoint, it's gonna be, what do you do for a living? But at the end of the day, like, if you're not having fun and you're just playing basketball, like, dude, you're literally just playing a sport. Like, I can go upstairs and do the exact same thing. I can try to kick the ball in for all I care. Like, if you're not enjoying it, then you need to
Yeah, what's the
figure
point?
something else out. Like, you need to probably do something else if you're not having fun.
Especially at the Division III level. I was a Division III athlete as well,
Me
so I
too.
get it.
Yeah, all
You
of
know what I
us.
mean? Yeah, all of us. So
Yeah, we all know you're doing it for the love of the sport. You're not getting athletic scholarship. You're not
Mhm.
getting a lot of looks to go play professionally. Like, I can probably name one guy from the Division III era that I know of that is in the NBA right now, and he spent 1 year at Williams College. There's a guy, Duncan Robinson, who's on the Pistons now. He spent 1 year at Williams College. Unfortunately, my dad did have to coach against him, and he was a stud. But
Duncan
after that, yeah,
nice.
after that, he went to Michigan, and then he went undrafted, and now he probably got some of the best contracts, I think, of any undrafted person. But again, unless you're that one example, there's so many other D3 athletes or just any athletes that, you're probably not going professional, because we know a small percentage that go on to play college. That's even smaller when you go to play at the next level. So you know what? Especially at the D3, you're doing this to make your 4 years go by, because you're still trying to just get a degree at the end of the day. Like, enjoy it. Have fun. Like, it's going to make your time go by that much easier and more enjoyable.
Potentially
Yeah.
add some purpose to your life if you still enjoy the sport.
Yeah, I totally agree. One of the topics I know that you wanted to talk about, if you want to dive deep into it, was well, which one would you rather talk about? You had the heavy lifting one, and then what was the other one?
You're putting me on the spot here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go into that first one. So, one of the things I wanted to get into is the idea, obviously, of lifting at a more sub maximal in season, or lifting heavy in season. I see a lot of people who say yes. I see a lot of people who say no. Uh, and it just amazes, obviously working with a lot of teams. I think, like a lot of things, there is a gray area of when you're able to do it. And I think when you lift heavy in season, when you're in season, you have to juggle a lot of different things. You have to look at what your game schedule is, what your practice schedule, how difficult the practices were. There's a lot of different constraints on what I can do. But I actually just started doing like the game day model, the match day minus model. I know I see a lot of times like Zach Zillner, he does it all the time. And I just started implementing a version of that, like with especially our basketball guys. If you're a certain amount of days away from game day, I vote, why do we not lift heavy? You lifted heavy and you really push yourself to a pretty high stimulus for all the months and weeks adding up to it. Then all of a sudden, now if we just add in a little more sport specific volume, now we're just going to completely take that away. I think essentially, for my opinion, it's doing a disservice if you're not able to, or if you not able to, if you choose not to. Obviously, there will be times where you have a pretty high volume of practicing games, where looking at something like that match day minus model is okay. You know what? Maybe we have too much volume that's focused for basketball specifically, which is the most important thing during the season. Maybe because of what they're doing, we're not able to, do a high load day. Maybe it's more of a moderate if we're a -2, doing a lot of explosive power output or speed develop, or continuously, doing stuff speed with low volumes all across the board. But if there's any chance, like, this past week we only had one game. We just opened up our season and we lifted on Monday. And I said, yeah, we're lifting heavy on Monday. We got 5 days till game day. We're gonna lift heavy. We're like, it just amazes me. I've had to convince so many different coaches that it's okay to lift heavy in season. So like I said, I just brought on women's basketball for us. And like the first week that she came in, she reached out to me, not even a week that she started. And she's like, oh, I want to talk about strength conditioning. And I said, yeah, like let's do it. Like, let's have that conversation. So I at least sat in her office for probably like a good 45 minutes. And she was asking me about like my philosophy and, the way I coach and everything. And I said, I'm going to be honest, obviously it's a low volume, nothing, for me, my take is, if I'm given the highest volume possible in season, it's a 3x6 of some sort. I wouldn't go anything higher than that. And that's just my choices. And that's just the stuff that I see. But like, if we're able to lift like a 3x3 or a 3x4 and you have the opportunity to push some weight, we're going to. And she really was questioning, not so much like a pushback, but was really like questioning because she's always understood of, oh, like I see the in season like as a maintenance phase and it's, obviously maintaining what you have. And so I see a lot of people do like 3x8 or 3x12. And I'm like, okay, so not going to say anything mean about somebody, but never listen to lifting advice from those people ever again, especially if they're saying to do that in season. But I'm like, yeah, like you're already practicing at, I'd like to assume 100 miles an hour. You're going to try to provide a similar stimulus in practice as much as you can to the game itself. And then you obviously have a high CNS output from the game also. So if you're doing all of that, your volume has to be pretty low, but there's no reason why you can't have a high load and high intent when you have enough or ample rest time in between. So I know I went pretty long-winded with that, but
No, that's great. I think
No.
you answered the whole thing in your explanation of the argument. It's not really intensity that's the enemy, it's volume. If you're talking about maintenance, so you do lightweight, but to make it more challenging, you do more volume, that's actually gonna add more stress to the body, which is gonna hamper performance more. But if you do low volume and high intensity, that actually is better for maintenance because it does not take a lot of volume. It just takes good intensity to maintain the ability to hit those outputs. Whether it's speed, you just very little bit dose speed, but at high intensities or, power or strength or anything like that. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but even, like, if you just use this example with her, for example, doing a push-up isn't as hard for most people, or at least high-level athletes, as, like, a really heavy bench press. If you do 3 by 3, of, like, really heavy bench press or you do 100 push-ups, which one are you gonna be more sore the next day?
That was literally what I was just about to say. Was like, what is more fatiguing?
Yeah,
Like a 3x3 trap bar deadlift at whatever,
90-ish percent.
80, 80,
Yeah,
80,
85, 90.
85%, whatever. 90, yeah, whatever. Or 20 RDLs because
Easy.
lightweight, high reps.
Yeah.
But what a lot of these sport coaches I don't think understand is like, again, that like lighter weights close to fatigue or failure is way more fatiguing than a heavy set of 5 or a
Yeah.
heavy set of 4 or a heavy set of 3. I was listening to Cressy talk about this. Like, he said that like what he does with a lot of the Yankees guys is like every third week they'll do a 2x3 trap bar deadlift, and like all their force plate numbers, like they keep all their gains throughout the season. So like every third week now, and because the host of the podcast asked him like, what do you do in between? And he's like, okay, well, that might be, it may still be like a trap bar pull, but it's like a trap bar pull for, it's a trap bar high pull, or it's a trap bar jump. It's like one of those in the middle exercises, again, for like that population
Yeah.
at that specific time is money. And I've kind of like taken a similar approach with like trying to manage the volleyball athletes, right? Because a lot of these volleyball girls, they just play. It's just all year round. I mean, I did the math like a year or two ago, and it was like, I think I came up with like, they get like 4 to 5 weeks off the entire year or something like that. It's kind of
Yeah.
crazy, bro. Like, they play way too much volleyball, and like, they wonder why, they have patellar tendinopathy all the time. It's like, you're just playing too much. And like, I had a parent ask me, like, it's a parent of a girl who's got a Division I scholarship. He said, hey, by January 1, it was like last week. He's like, by January 1, I want her to touch 10-1. Like, what's the program look like? I'm like, well, she hasn't lifted in 4 months because she's been like playing with her school. And just from a timing perspective, homework and all this stuff, like she just can't get, they can't get here. And they don't do any strength and conditioning at school. And I'm just like, well, I mean, we can't do like anything that intense like right off the bat, but I would venture to say that just like her getting in and like touching the weights again, like will probably be enough of a stimulus, and where she probably will touch 10-1 just because she's reintroduced the force side of the equation, and she really hasn't had like, it's not more approach jumps. Like, maybe like some other plyos, some bouncing off the ground, maybe some maybe some hopping, some bounding, maybe some like other sprinting, like some things that she hasn't been getting, but it's like doubling down and doing just more of the same stuff is not. But I've taken a similar approach as far as like the management of the stressors, from the perspective of like, all right, like I've tried to do a good job at like teaching the kids and the parents like how to consolidate stressors, and like, hey, like if you can sneak in here on a practice day, honestly, like, and just make that a high day, and then like Tuesday is a like complete off day, a day to like be a kid. So what I've done is just like, yeah, we'll do like that tune-up day, on the back end of the week, if they're in on a Thursday or a Friday. Now, sometimes like if it's a Wednesday and like they don't have a tournament till Saturday, I'll still be like, oh, we still got a window of opportunity. Like we can probably still lift heavy. Like you'll probably be good. But what I was saying to your point, Tyler, is like on that Monday, like I don't care how sore you are from your weekend tournament. Guess what? Like we're getting after it, baby. Like and that's, I explain this to the parents and the kids usually when I do their assessment, is like, if we're always just like, oh, they'll come in and be like, oh, can I tune up today? And it's a Monday. And I'm just like, we only have so many opportunities throughout the calendar year. Like, especially with like these volleyball kids, because of how, again, I told you 4 or 5 weeks, I think throughout the calendar year is like all they're getting off, these girls that are playing club and playing for their high school. And it may be a little more or a little less depending on vacations and whatever, but like they play a shitload of games. So it's like I only have so many opportunities to like help you level up your athletic qualities throughout the calendar year. And it's like, if we get into a habit of like, anytime you feel a little fatigued or anytime like your hands on hips jump mat number is a little down, like you're coming to me and asking to do a tune-up day, it's like I'm potentially robbing you of gains, and like we have that conversation. And I would say the overwhelming majority of my kids and my parents understand that stuff and like grasp kind of those concepts.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm not going to be a dickhead and be like, yeah, we're going to go 5x5 at 86.7%, like the day before weekend tournament. That's probably stupid. And again, the overwhelming majority of the time too, like when we do that tune-up day, like the kids like report back and they're like, I almost felt like more bouncy like the
Mhm.
next day. And I'm like, well, there's probably something to that. But no, lifting heavy, especially for high schoolers. Like, and I would say, especially for high schoolers that haven't been with me for like 3 or 4 years, that are like reaching kind of those, like, again, we didn't get into this, and maybe we can do another one at some point and talk about like how strong is strong. Yeah, but like if they haven't like approached a whatever 1.5 times body weight squat, I'm just using this as a like a reference, like
Mhm.
ish, 2 times body weight on a trap bar deadlift ish, like if they are not like even in the fucking ballpark with those things, like how stressful is the training even that they're doing? Like
Yeah.
how much, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's not that much fatigue you're generating because you're just not that strong yet. And
You
maybe
can't
I'm
choose
wrong.
a
And maybe I'm
bucket.
wrong. And maybe I'm wrong on that. Like
Yeah.
maybe again, it really is. And I get like that it is about like the individual and where they're at, and like what's stressful for them is stressful for them, right? But like, I mean, I remember how it felt, when I was younger, and I remember my early years in the weight room. I remember being very muscularly sore, but I don't remember ever getting like that. You guys have probably experienced this, where you guys definitely have, like where um I think Blaine was talking about like how he does like a squeeze test of his fist every morning. And he was like, it's not really scientific at all. He was talking about it with John Heck on John Heck's podcast. But he'll just like squeeze his fists, and like he'll use that to determine like how ready his nervous system is to perform. Like nowadays, as I've gotten bigger and stronger over the years, like I can tell like from a nervous system perspective, like when I'm like, oh shit, like I'm redlining, like I'm kind of shot, and maybe I need
Yeah.
just a low day, like some zone 2 conditioning, or some whatever arms and a long walk or a jog or whatever. Um, I don't really know. I feel like looking back, I don't really remember feeling like that when I first started training. Like
Mhm.
I don't ever really remember feeling like just my nervous system, like just feeling shot. I remember feeling a lot of muscular soreness,
Mhm.
but I don't ever really remember feeling like
Yeah, nervous system fatigue.
that, like that systemic redlining, I guess is what I would kind of describe it as. Like where if I did a grip, what's that called? Uh
Yeah, the grip strength meters or whatever they're
yeah,
Yeah,
called,
like if
yeah.
like
I
all
had
the
one of
I see
those.
like UFC fighters will sometimes do
Yeah,
that.
Well,
yeah.
yeah, that, or like even
Yeah,
like
jump
if
mats.
I do test my hands on hips on the jump mat, like it's
Yeah.
just trash. Like I don't remember feeling like that when I was younger, when I was a
Mhm.
kid. And I think that there's probably a lot of physiological things that we could talk about that like are going on there. But like I think part of it is just like you're not really that strong. So it's like you're probably not recruiting like the amount of like high threshold motor units as like somebody like that is well trained is. And again, I'm just spitballing things. Like I don't know for that and if any of this is like factual. What I'm getting at is like I want to take every opportunity that I can with high school kids and do what is best for them from a long term, kind of zooming out, like and missing opportunities on a Monday just because you're a little sore or a little tired is not that's probably not a good use of our time.
Also, kinda going into that, you're talking about, like, lifting heavy in season and, taking it easy and all these different things. If you take it easy forever, you never make gains, and then you're maintaining actually nothing. Like, you wanna make gains and then maintain that? And I would even argue you can still make gains in season because you don't have a choice anymore. Your season is now the whole year for most sports. I mean, you're talking about how you have the volleyball girls that have 4 weeks of, like, off season. You're not actually gonna kill them in those 4 weeks. They need some time to actually recover because 'cause they're gonna be playing volleyball the other 48 weeks out of the year. And so are you just gonna say that you're never gonna make gains on, like, any of your athletes? At some point, you have to train them with intensity. The key there is just essentially microdosing, is that if they're gonna be that busy, you have to put a lot of value in a little bit of time, a little bit of a volume, and then do that when you can. You have to be kind of opportunistic with that. And then the only time where a tune-up is really necessary is if, yeah, if there's too much muscular fatigue, or if you actually do test with jumps or like the grip strength, and you see that their nervous system is essentially shot, or you can just tell by these kids' energy. They just
Yeah.
come in and look like death. You don't push them on that day with intensity. But then, like, that's the other thing too. Leading into games, you say you can do a tune-up day and it's almost like a primer. That's great. Or you can also just overdo it where you make someone do way too much intensity, even if it's not a lot of volume, and then they actually are cooked going into the game, even if their muscles aren't fatigued. So there's a lot of like variables you have to consider. And then that's also where you talk about the high-low model. You almost want to lift hard on game days, but not before the games, because that'll kill you. But after games, you got a little bit of energy and all that stuff. Okay, and you know you have a rest day to like fully recover the next day. Do you wanna make every day a medium day because the heavy sports days, you don't touch the weights, and any days where it's not heavy on sports, you go really hard in the weight room, or do you wanna have a high day where it's hard, hard, and then easy, easy? So you just kinda have to use your judgment with that, and that kinda gets into I don't know how much time you guys have, like, just really quick, I wanted to talk about, like, periodization, and I see all these posts talking about, "Is periodization dead? Is this model better than that model?" And I just think it's all context dependent, and I don't like the whole, "Is it dead?" It'll never die because the concept of changing variables from phase to phase matters, right? But does it have to be linear all the time? Does it have to be conjugate? Does it have to be concurrent? Does it have to be all these? No, you can choose whatever you want. Personally, I work with a lot of like adults that just want to train for life. So we don't have to do a volume block and then a strength block and then a power block. And like they don't need that. We can train all qualities throughout the year. And then if they have a quality they prefer to train, we can maintain the others and develop one. And that's typically my preferred method and add some variability phase to phase without totally ignoring certain adaptations and then having to, like, almost refresh it when you revisit it. But, yeah, like, it's hard to do traditional periodization unless you're an Olympic athlete, you know when your event is, you have 4 years, you have all this time. Then you can really hammer in, like, a perfect 4-year plan and then a 1-year plan within that and then a month-to-month plan, and that's fine. But for the average person or even the average athlete now, if you only have 4 weeks of, like, off season, you have to be super flexible and, like, you don't always get to decide what the coach's practice schedule is gonna be, or do they make it to the final of a tournament, so they're that much more stressed? It's not dead, but it's just not as open, I guess,
No,
as
I don't think, I definitely don't think it's dead, and I think the context in that regard matters too, because I think
right.
Tyler can speak to this. Like, I think when you're in the college in a college setting, and you kind of have like your like
Yeah. off-season,
You have your
preseason, in
yeah, you
season.
have you literally because like that was the biggest thing. Like the Western Kentucky girl that I was speaking of,
Mhm.
she was having like chronic lower back issues, and I just like there was a chiro that told her it was her anterior pelvic tilt, and I was like, I
She's standing up straight. Like, yeah, she's fine.
that's ridiculous. I was like, maybe it's because you produce a shitload of outputs. Like you can jump out the fucking gym and you play 8 games in 3 days
Yeah.
on the weekends. Like
That might be part of it. Yeah.
maybe, maybe you're just fucking playing too much volleyball. Like,
Mhm.
and then so like what one of my first questions when she came back in was like, I'm curious, did you have any back pain? Like, in your freshman year of, she's like, none. And I'm like, well, and like she had some other aches and pains and stuff as a college athlete is going to have during a season, right? Again, because she's a really high level athlete and produces a lot of outputs, but it's like it's nowhere near the volume that she was getting, when she was in high school. So like, but to the periodization, like it's a mess. Like it's chaos with these kids for me. It's just like it is it really is like trying to like, all right, I sit down, I usually program in 4-week blocks, and it's like, all right, like what are the best things that I can do in this 4 weeks? And then inevitably something pops up. Like, yeah, I had a lesson today and like my knees are kind of like bothering me and they're a little flared up and like this split squat doesn't feel good. All right, well, like does this dumbbell step up feel better? Yeah, all right, like let's just roll with that. You know what I mean? So there's always like that kind of going in different direction. Again, like when the club stuff starts to pick up here. And again, I'm just using my volleyball girls as an example. Same thing with baseball. Like when the baseball
Mhm.
stuff picks up, it's like, all right, I gotta pick my spots when I can like load these kids and when, maybe I should, give them more of that power stimulus that's a little less, neurologically fatiguing and
Mhm.
a little bit more of that, whatever primer, whatever you want to call it. But I think the periodization model does lend itself well, probably in the college world, as far as like the traditional.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, like I think a lot of times periodization, I don't think it's dead so much. I think a lot of times it's just becoming misinterpreted. I think it's probably a way that you can go with it that, for me at least, I have my own feelings about it. And that's the nice thing is that there's no one above me in the college level that I can make the decisions. Obviously, I always have to justify the why of the decision I'm
Mhm.
making.
Mhm.
Like for me, when I look at periodization, the only focal point for me is really just going to be the volume at what they're training at.
Mhm.
Obviously, I say it to a lot of people like, hey, we're looking men's basketball. Season ends, regardless if you make the tournament or not. Let's say, you get a team who gets booted out of the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. So you made it to the first weekend of March. I'm like, okay, you guys are going to get a few weeks off and kind of just let your bodies obviously recover from the last 6 months you just had. Obviously it was pretty taxing mentally, physically. So when they do that, I'm letting them just completely shut off for a little bit and then we come right back into it. I'll be honest, like very rarely, and I see success with it for me, is that we're still starting a really high volume
Mhm.
and it's going to be more of just the volume of the total lifts essentially. Like I can't do the whole, hey, this is going to be a really high volume, this is going to be a really max strength because like why am I going to only do 4 weeks or a specific block dedicated to that? Like with the kids that I have, we need to generate power from day one and continuously keep that going as much as we can. Like, hey, guess what? Mid-March or, April, you're cleaning. We're cleaning. We're
Mhm.
going to do obviously the highest volume we probably can safely with cleaning.
Mhm.
And then, we're doing probably a higher sub max days. And then I'm actually the opposite. I actually like to do like an 8 week, shockingly. So I like to program like the 8 weeks. Obviously there's changes that can happen with that, but I put it out of okay, this is what we're doing week 1 through 2, then we're making this change. So then I know they're, gradually decreasing in volume as time goes on, but they're still keeping a really high intensity and obviously can have that progressive overload from each time.
Mhm.
And then at the end of the 8 weeks, maybe we've done like a test of some sort. So I'm testing to see where their metrics are. And obviously we test before everything even starts just to see the metrics of our starting point. And then I say, okay, like, what do we like? What do we not like? And when the guys give me feedback, because I have that relationship with them, which I know it was my other topic I wanted to get into was a relationship building, that they can tell me straight up, dude, this fucking sucked, or yeah, this was really good. And I'm like, okay, yeah, like I'll take that and just roll with it. You know, it's at the end of the day, it might not be what I want to do, but if it provides that stimulus and they enjoy it, we'll do it. But we're basically resetting at that time, and then we're just gradually getting lower and lower. So I think when you look at periodization, there's so many different philosophies behind it, and there's so many different ways that people kind of take that information, that yes, you could say periodization is dead. I think it's also, the way that I look at it is just a volume base, that we are in March, here we are in October, we're going to gradually make that decline, but we're not doing a focus block of every kind. And that's just the type of client essentially that I have, that I need to focus on as much power as we can, continuously get them strong, put on some size. So we're doing bouts of that for every session that we can. And then obviously we're just decreasing the amount of volume we can actually do it at, but we're continuously trying to build on each one of those different qualities.
Dude, that's great. And I think that it's a really sound way to do things in almost any context. If you do have the time for it, starting extensively and moving intensively, whether it's your speed development, your plyometrics, your power, your strength, whatever it is good. But also in the context of just teaching people, if you give them more reps early on, they can learn how to do a clean properly. When you do heavy cleans later on, it doesn't make sense to make them do heavy cleans so they don't know how to do it, and make them only do a couple reps. Because that's another kind of thing that people don't consider, is just learning movements.
Like to look at, yeah, and like Tyler, I think that's all great stuff. I just like to look at training, honestly, is like dials. Like I'm not a big proponent of like just turning up one dial all the way and then the other ones being,
And you
because
certainly can't crank both at the same
I
time.
think that is more of the traditional model, right? Like, is like, all right, like, capacity phase or hypertrophy
Mhm.
phase, like, okay, then strength goes all the way down, power goes all the way down. I don't think that really works well for athletes, especially that need like foot contacts with sprinting and general conditioning and power, strength. Like, kind of need all of that. It's just like, how much are we doing at certain times of the year? And for me, it's like certain times of the microcycle, like certain times of like every 4 weeks. It's like, generally like I have my kind of like generalized templates for like, okay, like, if we're doing whatever, like if I'm trying to accumulate some volume on their main lifts or whatever, and we're maybe I'm doing some eccentric tempos on those, then yeah, maybe I am going to keep the rep ranges a little bit higher on their secondary and tertiary exercises.
Mhm.
Vice versa, like when the training intensifies a little bit, and we're doing more concentric stuff, the secondary tertiary stuff will the volume will come down a little bit, and maybe I'm preferentially like, maybe I'll go like, okay, like we did, Copenhagen ISOs at the end. I'm just using this as an example, like as a tertiary exercise at the end during a more of an accumulation type of a, block or, phase for 8 weeks or so. And then like maybe that'll go to a lateral squat, a goblet lateral squat or a lateral lunge or something like that. That's loaded a little bit, loading the adductors through, a little bit more range of motion, a little bit more of an intense variation, right? So it's like just stuff like that. I think, again, just turning the training dials up and down, but making sure kids and athletes and humans are prepared, obviously, with, as you said, reps, like just getting in some reps, getting in some volume. Obviously, I think that's the place you want to start, obviously, with
Yeah.
most people.
And then just to tie this back to what we started with, talking about individualization, I think we all learned this really early on in our coaching careers. You can agree or disagree if this happened to you, but I would just imagine in the beginning, you think individualization is done before the session starts, before the phase starts. It's all done on paper. You write the most perfect program ever. And then you realize really early on, there is no perfect program. Someone's going to mess up your perfect program and you have to roll with the punches. And that's where like individualization really comes in and a coaching skill really comes in, is on the day of someone says, this hurts, I'm tired, this, that, the other. When I was a soccer coach, I'd write a plan based off like field space. I have this goal, I have this much field space. I'd show up to a field and like two other teams would be on the field and I'd get like a 20 by 20 yard patch for like 20 kids. Like, what am I supposed to do now? I
I'm
have like
supposed to
an hour
do
and a
this
half of this
now.
kid. So you just got to roll with it. You throw out the plan. You have to like act like you know what you're doing and like come up with stuff on the spot and do its best. But so I know we're kind of running out of time. I really want to do the hot takes. Everyone's got a hot take. And Tyler, if you don't mind starting that off, yeah, I really want to see what your hot take is.
All right. So as I said in the group chat, I have a story that goes along with my hot take. So I'm gonna try my best to make the story short, when I obviously, because we don't have a full-time strength conditioning coach here at the school, I'm the one that all the coaches will come to. So I'm not going to name names, obviously, but there was one coach that approached me previously, and I worked with a team, and it was a newer coach. So the coach was just hired, and I worked with that team previously, and they were all, the players were coming to me like, "Oh, like, are you gonna program for us?" And I'm like, that's a conversation for your coach." So they actually all like were almost referring me like, "Hey, you got to go talk to Tyler," like all this. So the coach comes to me and is like, "Oh, all the girls tell me, well, the girls, but all the girls tell me, you're good, and you done that." And I'm like, "Yeah, like we can have that conversation." So we end up having a conversation, and I'm like, "Oh, this is my philosophy. This is kind of what I do, and this is what I provide." The coach looks at me and goes, "Yeah, so I'm going to be honest. I have an idea already of, what they're going to do." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And the coach looks at me and says, "This is a program that I found. It prevents ACL tears." And I looked at him and I said, "Unless it's them like sitting on the couch for the next 8 weeks, that program fucking sucks. I don't even need to look at it to begin with, because that doesn't exist in the real world. You can help reduce the risk of injury, but fully preventing, I doubt that Tyrese Halliburton during Game 7 of the NBA Finals was trying to do something to prevent a ruptured torn Achilles. And, you're in the NBA, you have the best of the best. Essentially, you're a professional athlete, you have the best of the best, you take care of your body."
And he already had a calf strain.
He did.
And he
I
already
will. Yes, he went Game 6. He
and
had a
whenever you
calf
have
strain already.
and whenever you have an injury to an area, you're way more likely, like I don't know what the exact statistic is, but you're much more likely to injure that area or the surrounding areas. So it's like,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. So there
yeah,
is that. I mean, it's also at the same time, he was like, "It's fuck it. It's Game 7. Like, who cares?" I'm like,
yeah,
"All right,
shut the fuck up, Goda.
yeah, exactly." So the guy looks at me and I'm like, "Okay, so you have the program kind of already in place. What do you want me to do?" And he's like, "I just want you to put it in perspective." I'm like, "Okay, so I don't get any say in what I'm doing, in what my expertise is. You just want me to implement it." And the guy goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay." And this is where I'm going, I promise, is that I looked at the coach, last conversation we ever had, haven't talked to them since, said, "Respectfully, I will never tell you how to program your specific practice. So I really don't want you to tell me how to program my lifts.
I love that you
I'm going
stood
to
on
be
that.
and that's where my hot take is, let the expert be the expert. You're entitled to your own opinion. By all means, everybody can have an opinion about everything. But when you start telling someone who's the expert, which I still to this day don't even think I'm that much of an expert because I'm still newer in this. But if you're trying to tell the expert and you don't have the knowledge, you don't have a background, and you're just providing your opinion, you start telling the expert that they're wrong, newsflash, excuse my French, but you probably need to shut the fuck up once in a while. And you just need to essentially let the expert do what they're doing. I was never going to tell a coach of any sport, this is what you need to do. I've never played that sport. How am I supposed to know how to do that? Like, I'm going to stick to what I know, just like you stick to what you know. So I did not end up programming that coach in their team at all. So that was the last conversation we had. But that's my opinion, and not a hot take, but just let the expert be the expert or what they're doing.
There's two things that we can go off with that, and I appreciate that. Is one is, yeah, when I was a soccer coach, I thought refs should ref, parents should parent, players should play, coaches should coach, and you don't need anyone telling anyone else to do their job. And if you're all just kind of cordial, you'll have a good time. But you saw too many times where a parent wants to tell the ref how to ref and the coach how to coach, and maybe the coach sometimes oversteps and tells the parent how to parent. And like, that's not how it's supposed to be. You can have respectful conversations, but if you just tell someone, "I know better than you," and you don't actually have any skin in the game, then I think that's a little bit foolish. And then the other thing, and this is one that like really, really grinds my gears based off what you said, bulletproofing, injury prevention, all that stuff. Yeah, so bulletproofing. If you say bulletproofing and like you understand that it's not truly bulletproof and all that stuff, and that's a term that you use for sales or something like that, that's not the end of the world. But in general, like some people don't understand, you're selling a fantasy that you can prevent injury, and that doesn't exist. So yeah, kind of along those lines, I'm with you. You can reduce likelihood of injury, you can prepare people, but if you never get injured, it means you're not challenging yourself. You can get injured in the weight room. It's statistically pretty rare that that happens. I think it's like 1% of the time. And then yeah, you can like help people become. But like you're playing sports, you can jump up, land on someone's foot, roll an ankle, and there's no program in the world that keeps you from getting injured. Or someone can land on you, you can snap your arm, whatever. You have no clue what's going to happen. I appreciate that. My hot take isn't nearly as hot, so I feel like we should have ended with yours. Yeah, I was gonna say that working out with a partner isn't as good as it's hyped up to be, with the context that, like, if you work out with a partner that knows what they're already doing and you guys get to compete and all that stuff, great. But if you work out with somebody and they don't know what they're doing and you have to coach them through it, or they wanna chit chat and you're locked in and they're not locked in, like, I feel like it's not the best thing. If we worked out together right now, I think it'd be a great workout, but if, I've tried working out with friends sometimes, and man, it's not my favorite thing in the world. I guess along those lines too, with being locked in, I guess another hot take is that, hard music, like hip hop and, like, heavy metal, isn't the only music that's allowed in the weight room. You see some of the music I post sometimes, it'll be, like, some smooth, like, '80s music or something like that. You
Dude,
can listen to that.
we had one post each on one day where
Yeah.
we just had I think you had something with George Michael's and I put, like, Phil
Yeah, Careless
Collins.
Whisper. Yeah, and
Like,
Phil
yeah,
Collins.
it was top tier. I'll be honest, this morning when I was lifting, I was doing, 3 by 5 bench press, I had however much 215 or 220 on there, and I'll be honest, I literally was listening to, like, country, and I'm like, "This gets me in such a mood, I don't care," like, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm with you. I wanna try to make that, like, cultural shift where we see people playing a bit more variety in, like, the weight room. It doesn't I'm not saying rock and roll is bad. I'm not saying that, hip hop's bad. I like both of them. I have them in my playlist. I use it when I lift. But, I mean, I'll just put shuffle on, and sometimes the most random song will come on, and it'll work. Put shuffle on more is, I guess, my hot take.
No, yeah, definitely with that. I mean, obviously the music kind, like, I got guys more more in, like, the off season.
Yeah,
One of the fun things we actually like to do, like, keeping it fun, is that each guy on the team is able to kind of pick the music for the day. So like I already know there's one kid who is very similar to me because I'm a country fan to begin with. So he's like me, and I'm like, all right, like bro, what do you want today? Even though I already know what you want, and he looks at me, he just goes Morgan Wallen, put it on, and I said, all right, we're doing that. And then the next day, another kid comes in, and we have this one senior. The best example of that as I'm like, all right, B, what do you want, bro? And he's like, can you put on Michael Jackson? I looked at him, I said, I'm like, really? I'm like, do you want a specific album? Do we want the Invincible album? Which one do we want? He goes, put the Thriller album on. We literally lifted to the Thriller album. I think after that, like a week later, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try the same thing. So I agree with that. And then your other take with the working out with a partner, like I think at times it is fun, but I think, like you said, if you're two people like on very different levels, it's not going to be enjoyable because then you possibly have to tailor what you're doing to make that person feel included. And if you're sticking to what you're doing and you don't tailor it, they're not going to have a fun time because they don't know what the hell's going on. I mean, don't get me wrong. If I have like a buddy of mine and he trains like me or says, I want to do your workout, boom, we're doing my workout. You're going to do it. I'm not adapting anything. Like you're doing exactly what I'm going through. Like selfishly, I'm not changing what I'm going to do. But also like on the flip side, I don't know what it is for me. I'm a social person, but I love like when I do my lifts, cause I'm a morning lifter, when I get in there and it's just me in the weight room, nobody else. I can put on my Michael Jackson and just listen to that, and like that gives me peaceful bliss. Like that, the amount of hormonal response and physical response I'm getting from just lifting by myself, and then when I see the first person walk in, it all just goes away.
yeah. It's meditative, and I feel like that's kind of undervalued sometimes. People talk about it on, like, long runs, like, you can be lifting and having conversations. So, like, I try to work out with my wife sometimes. She's pregnant right now, so she hasn't been working out so much. But, like, she will be kind of, like, happy in the gym and, like, bouncing around and all that stuff, trying to chit chat. That is not my mood in the gym, I'm locked in because I 'cause I'm gonna put strain on my body, and I don't smile that much in the gym. I smile when I'm doing sports practice. I smile if I'm, like, outside doing, like, athletic stuff, if I'm sprinting, jumping on if I'm putting a bar on my back, you're not gonna get a smile out of me. You know what I mean? So, like, if it's not the same energy if there's another person who's locked in like me, we're gonna both gonna get hyped up or something like that. We're both gonna be kind of locked in, cool, but if we're on different wavelengths, I don't think it's the best thing in the world. The Michael Jackson thing, that's really cool, so I'm glad you said that. I've never heard of that. I have
Now
to
I know
lift
what
after
song.
this, I
Now
might
I
do
know
that,
what
yeah.
song I'm gonna use for my post later on today. I'm picking
Mid-Thriller?
something from picking something from that album.
I'll put another Michael Jackson song. I'll wait for your post, and then I'll make that my next thing, so
I'm going six
well, yes.
o'clock tonight.
Well, anyway, yeah, so I just wanna thank you for your time. This, I think, was a great episode. I hope people enjoy the different style and all that, and, I'm hoping, we can, run it back another time because I know there's more topics that you wanted to talk about and Ben wanted to talk about. So, but yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, man. I know, like I said, we've talked about that. I remember we literally had this conversation before we even recorded our episode that you were like, hey, like, let's get the three of us on.
Sure.
And like, we even said it leading up. We were going to probably need, if we wanted to get to everything, we were going to need like a 3 hour time window. I mean, we only each got to one of our topics. I think we had each like
Yeah,
two or
two or three
three that was
topics.
ready
Yeah,
to
yeah.
go. So, and obviously, Ben had to cut out, but like, we gotta run this back. We gotta run back a part 2. I think we have to.
Maybe I'll push it on him. I'll see if he wants to make it his podcast episode so that he can get another episode out there and we can give him some views and some listens and all that stuff. So, but yeah, man, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, of course, man.
Thank you.